In the depths of silence where shadows cloaked his world, he stood a man not given to extravagant gestures or loud pronouncements. He was not a man of war but of silence which cut far deeper than any spoken words could ever reach. His silence was a fortress, an indomitable bastion where betrayal found no refuge, where wounds were hidden to fester until such time as reckoning might call. Why, you may ask, would such a man remain silent? Is silence not the domain of the defeated, the refuge of those resigned to their fate? Yet not all silences are born of weakness. Some are crafted from the sharp threads of strategy woven with care and patience into a tapestry of retribution. There are men who are broken by betrayal, who crumble and fall under the weight of deception. Then there are those who grow sharper in the shadows, cast by treachery, their resolve hardening with each calculated breath. Each moment of mute endurance is not surrender but a honing of the spirit, a preparation for the moment when silence is replaced by the swift, cold precision of retribution. He stood amidst the whispers of his own tormented thoughts, an echo of stillness in a storm-tossed sea, a king in his clock of quiet awaiting the day of reckoning. In this silence he moved like a shadow, unobtrusive, unseen, until the time was right to emerge, to confront the darkness with the illuminating force of justice. His silence was a weapon, a carefully unsheathed blade hidden beneath the folds of his stillness. For some kings do not roar, they wait, then they erase. Each silence carried with it an unspoken promise, each moment a possibility, each breath an echo of decisions yet to unfurl. Why choose the silence of strategy over the noise of confrontation? For him, it was the knowledge that every word unsaid was a trap being set, every pause, a build-up of resolve. His silence was a museum of grievances, each one placed meticulously in its perfect space, waiting to be unveiled when the moment called. Those who crossed him mistook his quiet for cowardice, not knowing the dangerous steadiness that lied beneath that placid exterior. Silence is not for the faint of heart but for those who understand the power of speaking without words, of drawing strength from stillness. Some betrayals echo louder in silence than in screams, each reverberation a reminder of trust broken and bonds severed. In that cold light of internal reflection, the darkness was confronted piece by piece until the clamor of confusion subsided, leaving behind the clarity of intent. She thought his silence meant surrender. It was strategy. Has silence ever been sweeter, more filled with anticipation than in the moment before action is taken, a silence that ascends into a crescendo of rightful reckoning? She mistook his reserve under her dismissive gaze as a sign of weakness. Yet he knew that true power belonged to those who wield it with restraint, those who understood the might of patience and the precision of a well-laid plan. When it became necessary, he would turn the very fabric of silence into a statement so profound it would ripple through every corner of betrayal, a declaration of independence from pain, a liberation from the chains of emotional deceit. In the realm of personal turmoil there lies a rift, a chasm, where ego and humility reside side by side, locked in eternal struggle. For some, this battle cries out to be silenced by words and actions. For others, the mere act of waiting becomes an act of rebellion in itself, a defiance of expectations. And so in the cold weariness of his lonely vigil, the world of shadows that seemed to envelop him was not the end but the beginning, a prelude to a symphony of justice as yet unrevealed. In the echoes of silence, his spirit was neither crushed nor broken, but simply gathering strength for the fight that would inevitably come. As the world turned and life persisted its inexorable march, the silent king found solace in the knowledge that when silence has made its preparations complete, it can shatter worlds with a whisper. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful confrontation, the fragile cracks in Helen's relationships began to widen into seemingly unbridgeable chasms. Up until this moment, Helen had worn the sacrifices she made for her son Michael and his family like a cherished cloak of unconditional love. An all-encompassing love that often forced her to bury her own desires beneath the weight of obligation. Michael had been her pride and joy, the anchor to whom she had tethered her dreams of familial harmony and legacy. But in the house owned by her son and his wife Linda, the once warm atmosphere had grown cold, echoing with resentment and unspoken accusations. Helen had poured herself entirely into supporting Michael both emotionally and financially. She helped him through college, patching up the fabric of his dreams with her tireless efforts, and became his trusted confidant. She was there during his first taste of adult responsibility and lent a hand whenever his world temporarily crumbled. Yet the sacrifices she made were not limitless, and slowly she began to awaken to the earth-shattering realization that her devotion had become an expectation rather than an appreciated gift. Linda's hostility was an abrasive handler, carelessly unraveling the stitches of Helen's carefully nurtured family tapestry. Linda's aggressive coldness toward Helen was a constant undercurrent tugging at the seams of Helen's composure. But Helen endured dismissing this hostility as a fringe discomfort, a small price for the larger goal of familial cohesion. Little did she realize that this bubbling resentment was eventually going to boil over, appearing starkly during what seemed to be a trivial event, a confrontation over a slice of cake. The cake was more than mere sugar and flour. It was the symbol of a shared celebration, the glue binding the hopes of family. But when Linda declared it exclusively for her own nuclear family, denying Helen even a taste, it became clear that the deficit of gratitude ran deeper than Helen had anticipated. The dismissal was not of the cake itself, but a glaring dismissal of Helen's sacrifices, a stark illustration of how little her contributions were esteemed. To Helen, the slice was a metaphorical portion of her heart that had been cut away unbidden by the ones she had nurtured. Peering into the hollow carapace of lost hopes and tethered love, Helen's sorrow transformed into a sort of awakening, a realization that in the ledger of family ties, her sacrifices were an unjustifiable expense largely repaid with indifference. Michael's lack of intervention or support in her favor during the cake incident pierced sharper than the most biting of words. It served as incontrovertible evidence of her second-class standing in a family hierarchy that construed her devotion as a burdensome relic of antiquated obligations. Helen's internal examination became a desolate inventory of emotional investments met with depreciating returns. Her heart grew heavy with the weight of unrealized dreams and shattered expectations. She began to comprehend that her sacrifices, while initially made without expectation, had gradually constructed an invisible debt she hoped would be repaid with recognition and respect, two currencies she now knew were perpetually out of circulation in her son's household. She realized the sacrifices she deemed investments in family unity had been transformed into expectations by those she had hoped would cherish her. The realization twisted like a knife, cutting deeply into her perception of herself within the familial landscape she had helped cultivate. It was as if the bonds she had cultivated were nothing but illusionary chains, keeping her tethered to a reality where her worth was weighed and found wanting by the very kin whose lives she had helped shape. This moment of clarity served as a crucible of emotional transformation for Helen. As she sifted through the ashes of her disillusionment, she found within herself a core of resilience and a determination to reclaim her life from the tendrils of unrecognized sacrifice. The confrontation over the cake became the catalyst for Helen's journey towards redemption. Her heart, though bruised and battle-weary, only burned brighter with the realization of a universal truth: it was time to alter the narrative. In recognizing the evaporating veil of unappreciated sacrifice, Helen embraced the stirring possibility that she could forge a new path, one unburdened by the weight of disillusionment. She had uncovered the profound understanding that her journey, though impossibly complex, was hers to navigate alone. Her soul was now aligned with the resolve that she would no longer be the silent martyr in a family that did not hear her earnest call for acknowledgement. Instead, Helen would write the next chapter of her journey as the empowered architect of her destiny, reshaping her world into one where sacrifice was no longer synonymous with silence. The series of events leading to this moment were as carefully orchestrated as they were painful for Helen. Just weeks prior, she had stood in her family's home, the very space she had once housed with love and care, now morphing into a backdrop of treachery. The meticulous illusion of harmony she had maintained unraveled in strands of deceit woven together by her most cherished son Michael and his deceptively charming wife Linda. Helen's eviction was more than a forced removal from brick and wood. It was a banishment from the life she had nurtured into being, a blade driven deep into the very notion of family itself. The clever yet ruthless maneuver by Linda and Michael was a masterpiece of legal cunning. They had masked their betrayal in layers of legal jargon. Helen hardly understood an eviction notice craftily entwined with exploits of ignorance and trust. The threads of powerlessness tugged at Helen's heart, an oppressive reminder that the blood ties she had valued so dearly could congeal into shackles, imprisoning her within a facade of love that never truly existed. The stripping away of her home symbolized the tearing down of her world, a well-executed plan leaving her to face the ruins they had purposefully created. Helen's heart weighed heavily with betrayal, her emotions a tempest of rage and sorrow as she stood amongst the rubble of her shattered existence. The acute pain of abandonment became Helen's constant companion, every thought, every memory tainted with the bitter taste of treachery. To have been reduced to this left grappling for understanding in the empty spaces that were once filled with the warmth of familial affection was to endure an isolation far deeper than physical separation. In this bitter crucible of despair, Helen discovered an unexpected clarity. She sifted through the darkness, taking stock not only of the betrayals but also of the fire now kindling within her. What mattered no longer was the immensity of the loss, but the depth of her resolve, the incontrovertible hunger to reclaim her dignity and wield it as armor against the sting of ingratitude. The world was no longer toiling as the servant to her dreams, but as the forge to her fortitude. Her solitude, once perceived as a gaping void, now echoed with the whispers of opportunities waiting to be seized. If Michael and Linda's betrayal was the catalyst, then justice would be the crucible in which she reforged her life anew. Though humiliation had been forced upon her, Helen knew that pride could still be reclaimed. Her eviction had been crafted to strip her of control, but it was within this barren landscape that Helen would plant the seeds of her ascendancy. She let her mind wander through the possibilities, the delicate art of retribution shaping itself from the ether of her imagination. There would be paths to tread, avenues of justice to pursue that would see scales tip and balances redress not with vengeance but with the consequence swiftly delivered by the one they had so thoroughly underestimated. Helen would not stir in haste nor act with unpredictable emotion. Her recalibration was methodical, her next steps deliberate. But the road to vindication was not so easily trod. Though her spirit rallied, the physical realities of dislocation presented their own grueling challenges. The wrenching displacement found its twin in the financial intricacies that compounded her plight, yet Helen was resolute in her refusal to tremble. Every politicized maneuver, every deceitful strategy that Linda and Michael concocted to uproot her served only to strengthen her pragmatism. There would be no shortcuts back to solace, no miraculous pivots of fortune, only the steady application of will, coupled with the guidance of a cherished principle, knowing that what you reap is precisely what you've sown. Yet from this profound alienation, Helen unearthed a glimmer of hope she had not anticipated. Estranged from her kin, who had turned their backs, she found allies in unexpected quarters, colleagues, friends from years past, neighbors who were unswayed by the poison spilled by her son and his wife. Their offers of support, modest yet genuine, endowed Helen with a new form of family, formed not from blood, but from the shared understanding of empathy and mutual respect. With their help, a network formed an unseen tapestry on whose threads she began to walk towards the dawn of restitution. The journey became an intricate dance of strategy and subtlety. Helen had to learn to move deftly through a world bent on preserving the status quo of her subjugation, steering her course with both an unforgiving eye on her obstacles and an enduring empathy for the human flaws at their core. To acknowledge the complexity of love and betrayal was to master the art of living, and so Helen, emboldened by her newfound clarity, set forth to demonstrate that no single act of betrayal, no matter how profound, held the power to define her existence. Only she could do that, and do that she would alone, yet entirely empowered. Helen's newfound wealth was not just a beacon of financial stability but an unexpected instrument of emotional restitution. Suddenly, a cascade of possibilities unfolded before her, a broad canvas upon which she could paint a future unshackled from the chains of betrayal and contempt. The news of her brother Daniel's demise had reached her like a distant rumble of thunder, his loss, a sting of sorrow yet muted by their years of estrangement. Daniel had been distant, a wanderer who kept to himself even as he amassed a modest fortune through shrewd investments. His inheritance came as an unforeseen windfall, threading Helen's despair with threads of potential glory. The inheritance, however, brought with it an ambivalence difficult to navigate. On one hand, the wealth was a gift, a golden key unlocking doors that had been walled shut for so long, a chance for refuge and renewal. Yet it also stood as a stark reminder of what had been absent in her life's narrative: love, consistency, familial integrity. In embracing the inheritance, Helen grappled with a mosaic of emotions, gratitude intertwined with residual bitterness, affection colored by grief. But now, with her financial independence assured, Helen had an opportunity to rewrite the contours of her destiny. Money, after all, was more than a mere vehicle for comfort. In her hands it transformed into an agent of delicate strategic retribution. Ah, the beauty and peril of karma. Helen was now in a unique position to craft a narrative of justice. This inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was a rebirth, a compensation for anguish, endured, a stepping stone toward reclaiming her autonomy and dignity. While the terms of her inheritance laid bare before her, Helen pondered over the best way to wield this newfound power. The thought of retaliation simmered beneath the surface, a revenge served cold yet flavored with meticulous precision. She envisioned a plan honed by patience and wisdom, not driven by raw vengeance but a demonstration of equilibrium restored. Helen knew she had to be discreet, her maneuvers subtle yet unyielding. This was not a battle to wage alone. The very empathy she cultivated manifested in the unlikely allies surrounding her. Her new family, forged not by blood but by solidarity and shared conviction, provided counsel and courage. Each whisper of encouragement fortified her resolve. Their stories, their steadfast optimism despite similar betrayals, became a bridge she crossed with newfound strength. First, she sought the counsel of a brilliant but discreet financial advisor, one skilled in the quiet art of wealth management and protection. Helen's intent was clear with her inheritance. She would weave an intricate net around Linda and Michael, a web of intention both protective and punitive. Her resources would fuel this silent campaign, a campaign to right the wrongs inflicted upon her. Strategically, Helen began to allocate funds carefully, creating the scaffolding for justice. A shell company materialized, a separate entity, to procure the debts lurking behind Michael and Linda's facade of prosperity. She began to build her empire of retribution, with every plan crafted to turn the tables, not just for a brief emotional high, but a sustainable recalibration of power and respect. The beauty of her strategy was, in its anonymity, a behind-the-scenes orchestration that masked the Avengers' hand. No aggrandizing declarations, no public victories, just quiet steps leading to inevitable reckonings. In her mind, Helen envisioned the dramatic reveal, a moment where Michael and Linda, once imperious architects of her humiliation, would realize the precariousness of their pedestal, brought down by the very foundation they dismissed as insignificant. Simultaneously, Helen's newfound financial prowess gave her latitude to cultivate a life of personal fulfillment and growth. Embarking upon her interests long neglected, she reveled in the capacity to give life to dreams previously deferred. This dual journey toward justice and personal liberation wove together the narrative of her healing. Her path was crafted not solely by retaliation, but the richer understanding of life's delicate balance between pain and resilience, loss and recovery. Helen's story became a blueprint for others who might find themselves bereft of familial allegiance, a testimony to the art of living fitfully, bravely, enduringly composed. Her narrative pierced through the shadows of deceit, illuminating a world where identity and integrity are reclaimed, not lost to the whims of betrayal. Now, with a renewed sense of purpose and the financial means to bolster her drive, Helen perpetuated her pursuit not merely as an act of revenge, but as a proclamation of her journey toward dignity, autonomy, and self-realization. Through sheer determination, Helen endeavored to transform her pain into a springboard for fortitude, knowing well that the true essence of justice lay not in the fall of others but in the rise of her own spirit. The unexpected tide of her newfound inheritance offered Helen a canvas upon which she could paint her strategy, a meticulous stroke for each slight, each tear shed, each bruised moment of dignity. Stepping back from the emotional fray, she approached the task at hand with the precision of a surgeon dissecting the financial vulnerabilities of those who had wronged her. The first cog in her plan was set into motion by enlisting a private investigator, an unassuming professional who specialized in unraveling the threads of personal finances and informal debts. What he found was a revelation. Michael and Linda, as insidious as they were imprudent, had tangled themselves in a web of fiscal imprudence, gambling with high-risk investments and funds they scarcely had. Silent as a shadow, Helen charted her course. With resources that only her legacy could afford, she established a shell company, deliberately faceless to encroach upon the periphery of their financial Achilles heel. By acquiring their mounting debts in the shadows, she engineered a reversal of their fortune, ensuring each misstep was now bound by invisible threads to her burgeoning plot. This was not impulsive revenge, it was the surgical extraction of justice calculated in cool logic and patience with the quietly thrilling anticipation of inevitable reckoning. Her maneuvering required her patience, her cunning, but most importantly the ability to feign submission. She played the role of the peripheral matron once discarded, now conveniently glanced over. As Helen continued her performance, she observed the dynamics she had once been blind to, and it was liberating to be unnoticed in her pursuit of the genuine power she was conjuring from their arrogance. Her guise allowed her to hear whispers of conceit from Linda, boasts of invincibility from Michael, echoing through the channels she had established to keep watch on their downfall. Even so, inflicting financial torment was never the ultimate aim. The opportunity to teach them the lessons of empathy, respect, and humility drew her closer than the allure of simple vengeance. Helen contrived to enlighten them whether they wished to learn or not through the carefully constructed reality she was orchestrating. She wanted Michael to experience what she had endured due to his indifference, for Linda to feel the sting of her shallow superiority crumbling under the weight of their choices' consequences. And so the scene was set, the stakes clear, even as Michael and Linda wallowed in the illusion of impunity. Unbeknownst to them, Helen was weaving her influence into their lives, watching from the vantage of the marionette, both orchestrator and reluctant savior. They were entangled in a snare of their own hubris and underestimation, each decision binding them tighter to the fate that approached under the guise of financial redemption. Helen's ultimate aim crystallized through this complex choreography. Redemption, while remote, was desired not just for herself, but for the son whose path she had hoped to guide the daughter-in-law she had wished to welcome. Vindication lay in not only reclaiming her autonomy, but in witnessing their awakening to the familial bonds they had fractured. For Helen, true justice revolved not around hollow triumph but the reintegration of what had been shattered. Thus her plot ripened under the quiet intensity of her resolve. In this design she nurtured the possibility of transformation, even as the first tremors of their impending downfall whispered through their unsuspecting spirits. The artistry in her subterfuge lay not in the destruction of their world, but the profound restructuring of it, fueled by the silent resilience she had honed amidst the ruins of their betrayal. The story was far from its denouement. Yet the groundwork for restoration, for justice, and for renewal lay firmly in place, waiting to unfold with quiet precision. Unknown to them, the stage was set for their most profound lesson, a realization that arose from within, inspired by the very foundation they regarded as insignificant. With quiet determination, Helen initiated a masterstroke in reclaiming her power, drawing upon an inheritance that transformed overnight from a token of chance into a formidable tool of strategic leverage. The change was galvanizing, like steel tempered by the flames of humiliation and indignity. What Helen wielded was not merely wealth, but a tactical advantage capable of reshaping the familial landscape that had conspired against her. Helen's voice, long subdued under the weight of her sacrifices, began to take on timbre. In the intimate theater of their day-to-day interactions, her facade of submission persisted, a tactical misdirection, a necessary deception, while behind the scenes she meticulously manipulated the contours of her plan. As Helen feigned ignorance and acceptance, she gathered intelligence like a grandmaster, assembling a chessboard for the inevitable gambit that lay ahead. In the intricate dance of familial politics, Helen displayed the acumen of a seasoned strategist. This was not about the rash satisfaction of immediate triumph, but about the enduring construction of justice and empowerment. Her calculated silence was underscored by the secret acquisition of financial control, a keystone she built with shrewd investments and deliberate caution. Helen knew all too well that to reclaim her place, she must first destabilize the foundation they unwisely assumed was indomitable. Anticipation built with every step as Helen orchestrated a complex investment scheme designed to appeal to Michael's and Linda's latent greed. To the untrained eye, her demeanor remained unchanged, loving, albeit distanced, yet underneath laid a mind honed sharper by every perceived rejection and dismissal. Her tactics involved the establishment of an investment fund, impeccably cloaked as an opportunity too tempting for Michael and Linda to resist. What unfolded was the careful infiltration into their financial veins as she positioned herself through intermediaries and shell companies to acquire their accumulating debts. It was the ultimate checkmate, a poised maneuver where the predator remains hidden until revealing the game was hers all along. Helen's resolve manifested as relentless pursuit, driven not by vengeance itself, but by the justice she longed for. Her aim was pure, to achieve a reckoning that spoke volumes more in redemption than in retribution. Each action calculated, she charted a course through murky legalities, ensuring each step remained firmly within the lines that society deemed acceptable, while nudging her son and daughter-in-law towards inevitable reckoning. When you observe someone like Helen, understand that the triumph lies not in crushing foes beneath the weight of one's fortune, but in artfully steering them towards self-awareness, the realization that tides shifted beneath complacent feet. Herein lies the zenith of empowerment, where strength masquerades as wisdom and retaliation morphs into the act of reclamation. In each seemingly innocuous encounter, in every word exchanged, Helen maintained steadfast her hidden reality, a fortress of cards predicated on the assumption that a mother's disposition is eternal and blind to all transgressions. But theirs was an underestimation that would cost dearly, blindness that would yield pivotal lessons. As Helen navigated the convolutions of her strategy, she invited those involved to discover the fragility of their mirage. Her operations relied not solely on financial savvy, but on the psychological dexterity to guide Michael and Linda, gently yet firmly, toward a point where the realization was as enlightening as it was inescapable. This is where the complex terrain of family and finance coalesces into a tapestry thick with possibilities of redemption, begging you to question where true loyalty resides. For Helen, the notion of subjugation slowly ebbed away. Where they had seen vulnerability, she now saw a fount of strength, her lifeline tethered to an unwavering sense of self that survived in the crucible of their ambitions and machinations. As Helen prepared the finale of her carefully staged plan, she understood that their awakening, though born of hardship, was the first step toward reintegration into the familial embrace she still held dear. Amidst these tectonic struggles, her road was illuminated by a philosophy old as time, the quiet, resolute belief in transformation driven less by vindictiveness than by an intrinsic desire for balance, a justice she was orchestrating with the precision they never envisioned. As Helen moved the pieces ever closer to their final place, the seeds of a profound lesson were sown, a garden sown with both revenge and redemption. The curtain had not yet dropped, but Helen's reclamation of power was not merely in setting the stage. It resonated in each calculated decision, sparking a reckoning where fractures would heal into the mosaic of a family once again, whole, no longer fractured by its past, but instead made stronger through its redefinition. The clever orchestration of Helen's plan hinged on what could only be described as an audacious gamble, a deceptive investment scheme designed to manipulate Michael into lending her money. The intricacy of her blueprint was underscored by its simplicity. It was the allure of easy money that folded Michael and Linda neatly into Helen's deceptive embrace. The guise of a promising investment too tempting to pass up was precisely the snare she set a siren call that they could not resist due to their insatiable greed. At its core, Helen's approach played into one of the most fundamental aspects of human psychology, the desire for more, the incessant pursuit of gain that blinds even the most prudent to glaring red flags. She knew that Michael and Linda, despite their pretension of financial acumen, were vulnerable to the sheen of a lucrative opportunity. The lust for quick wealth was their Achilles heel, and Helen leveraged every piece of knowledge she had about their fiscal follies to ensure they took the bait. Once a mere bystander to their self-indulgence and disregard, Helen now sat at the helm directing their actions with invisible strings. She employed a masterful control of psychological manipulation, befriending allies within her intricate web of intelligence to create an investment presentation complete with fake paperwork and drafted success stories. As the orchestrator of this charade, Helen's demeanor remained unflinchingly serene, her true intentions hidden beneath layers of calculated charm and feigned vulnerability. Her pitch was flawless, a concoction of enticing figures and tales of skyrocketing returns, promising a fortune just a touch beyond their reach, but only if they acted quickly. Michael, ever the opportunist posing as the savvy investor, saw a chance to confirm his superiority in financial matters over his mother, whom he perceived as naive. In his arrogance, he signed over the check with the misplaced confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. But in this drama, Michael and Linda were not players of their own making, they were chess pieces in Helen's endgame. For Helen, each duplicitous move was calculated to bring them not just closer to their financial entanglement, but also to force them face to face with the consequences of their actions. Her restraint was formidable, as was the satisfaction each time Michael unknowingly tightened his financial tether to her. The anticipation was less about the act of revenge, and more about the profound realization they would soon encounter, a reflection of the hollowness of their so-called victories over her. On the dawn of revelation, they would find themselves ensnared, not just by legal obligations, but by the tangential reminder of their own folly. As they blissfully placed their trust in the shimmering mirage Helen constructed, they remained unaware of the looming storm. The art of Helen's vengeance lay not in humbling them through their failures, but in educating them about self-awareness and, in turn, accountability. Each moment spent watching her plan unfold ignited the equal parts of strategy and poetic justice she embodied. The dialectic between her public submission and private control was where she found her strength, an inspirational testament to those who had ever felt powerless against oppressive forces. What they presumed to be her swan song was in fact her debut, a manifestation of empowerment cloaked in vulnerability. Michael and Linda continued on, oblivious to the shifts in the tectonic plates beneath them. Yet to Helen, the reality was as clear as daylight. Their mirage was fragile, a veneer over the profound reckoning she was poised to deliver. The ironic twist was that they believed themselves to be players in control, unaware that each step was one they took fortuitously towards their own enlightenment. The precision of Helen's execution marked more than the advent of justice. It was a revelation dawned in the practiced art of patience, born from years of enduring manipulation and marginalization. In this psychological arena, she was not merely enacting revenge, she catalyzed transformation, a cycle of learning that transcended their superficial existence. Eventually, they would see beyond the veneer and into the substance of the truth Helen had orchestrated. Their world, as Michael and Linda knew, it was about to change irreversibly. With a deftness honed from survival and a resolve tempered in the fires of betrayal, Helen was leading them to their inevitable epiphany. And as they danced to a tune they presumed was of their own making, they remained blissfully unaware of the grand revelation they were hurtling towards, one that would irrevocably alter the tessellation of their lives, as Helen wielded her quietly orchestrated power. Amid a tense afternoon sun streaming through the curtained windows of the once warm family home, the understated battle reached its crescendo. Michael and Linda sat in their ornate yet suffocating living room, poised on the precipice of learning precisely how shrewdly the tables had turned. As Helen, the seemingly defeated matriarch they had underestimated, prepared to reveal her newfound leverage, the air crackled with an almost predatory anticipation. This revelation was not birthed from malice but from the meticulous strokes of justice that Helen had been crafting in quietude. Years of being the supportive mother, the reliable constant, and the silent bearer of familial burdens had prepared Helen for this moment. She had been the shadow in their triumphs, now becoming the very architect of their introspection. When Helen spoke, her voice was calm but layered with a resonance that demanded attention. She disclosed her status not just as their mother and mother-in-law, but as the powerful creditor who now controlled their financial fate. The dawning of truth was astonishing, as the threads of Helen's narrative unraveled in a beautiful tapestry of justice. The disbelief that etched across Michael and Linda's faces was unmistakable, an expression that danced between disbelief, confusion, and a slowly creeping panic. They had been confident, perhaps too confident in their mastery of their small universe, oblivious to the silent shifts orchestrated by the woman who had given them everything. Helen's announcement was a calculated detonation, an awakening that shook the very core of the foundations they had believed impenetrable. Strategically, Helen unfurled the terms of repayment, detailing the intricate web they found themselves ensnared in. Her words were precise, legally sound, and devoid of the emotional turmoil that had marked her past interactions with them. Now she stood as an emblem of agency, reclaiming the respect and authority that her sacrifices had once undermined. She outlined her expectations not from a place of vengeance, but from a genuine desire for amends, for a recalibration of relationships that had long been imbalanced. In that moment, Michael and Linda realized the extent of their underestimation. They were confronted for the first time with the stark reality of their actions and the repercussions they unleashed. The panic began to take root as clarity replaced the illusion of control they had clung to so desperately. Helen had orchestrated her ascension in the guise of financial empowerment, transforming their misguided confidence into a poignant lesson in humility. As Helen continued, the room grew silent, the weight of her words echoing with each heartbeat. The discomfort was palpable as she meticulously outlined the debts they had accumulated, debts now held by the woman they had thought powerless. Her demands weren't severe, but they were firm, designed to enforce a recognition of past errors and inspire a reformation in character and values, a psychological masterstroke that elevated her beyond the realm of simple vengeance. For Helen, this was never solely about revenge, it was about liberation. Liberation not only for herself, but also for Michael and Linda from the thrall of their self-imposed blindness. By reinstituting herself as the key player in their financial and emotional lives, Helen offered them a unique opportunity for redemption, a chance to rebuild the integrity of their relationships from this new foundation of honesty and reflection. Michael, mentally recoiling from the punch emotionally delivered, began to question the very fibers of his understanding. His past indifference, glossed over with the insipid banality of everyday life, was now exposed for the betrayal it was. And Linda, whose machinations had once seemed so infallible, found herself grappling with the ethical void her status-seeking had carved into their shared existence. They were thrust into an uncomfortable introspection, forced to confront not only the woman in front of them but the weaknesses they had fostered within themselves. Helen's quiet revelation marked a pivotal axis in their intertwined narratives, catalyzing a transformation that so clearly spoke of not only justice but of the discipline and patience required to achieve it. As the shadows in the room grew longer, Michael and Linda were left to ponder the realities that had so suddenly altered the landscape of their lives. The profound notion that actual power lay not in the overwrought spectacle of wealth or control, but rather in the unwavering dignity of a mother who had once been dismissed. As the echoes of Helen's quiet revelation settled, the intricate dance of transformation began for Michael and Linda. They were no longer insulated by the superficial veneer of status and wealth, free-falling into a reality that demanded introspection and adaptation. Their new financial constraints served as ruthless mirrors, forcing them to confront the fleeting nature of the material security they once took for granted. It was an internal reckoning, not just about Helen's intervention, but about the essential values they had dismissed in their relentless pursuit of superficial success. Michael, initially ensnared by the disbelief of Helen's newfound control over their finances, found himself at an emotional crossroad. Stripped of his financial arrogance, he faced the stark realization that he had allowed complacency to guide him. His previous indifference towards relationships had been buoyed by a misguided sense of security through wealth, a belief now dismantled by Helen's strategic chess moves. This dismantling ignited an unexpected journey within him, sparking questions of self-worth beyond the monetary, encouraging a more profound reflection on how he equated success with happiness. For Linda, the journey was equally visceral. Her identity, meticulously constructed around perception and external validation, crumbled as she recognized the futility of her previous machinations. Suddenly vulnerable, she was catapulted into a sphere where her value could no longer be measured by status alone. The ethical chasm previously hidden by her relentless climb to societal peaks was laid bare. In this vulnerable exposure, Linda began to navigate the tangled web of her motivations, reassessing the priorities that had bolstered her self-worth and acknowledging the impact of Helen's deliberate intricacies. Their newfound humility was not immediate but emerged from the trenches of necessity. Altered financial priorities meant Michael and Linda had to reevaluate their lifestyles, prompting shifts from conspicuous consumption to a more pragmatic approach to living. They embarked on a journey of simplification, where the absence of prior luxuries revealed the core values they had forsaken. In these moments of simplicity, they found the elusive clarity in relationships, an understanding that bonds rooted in authenticity and mutual respect fared stronger than anything manufactured by wealth. Amidst the chaos, they were confronted with the concept of genuine accountability. The shift from external blame to internal reckoning was arduous, yet it became a crucial part of their emotional renaissance. Michael began to reconnect with aspects of his character that had lain dormant during years of chasing the illusion of prestige. As strength supplanted by vulnerability, he questioned the internal dichotomy he had harbored, longing for a future sculpted by personal integrity rather than societal accolades. Linda, on the other hand, experienced a grounding transformation. With a deeper awareness of her past manipulations, she recognized the significant distance between the person she had become and the person she desired to be. Her exploration journey became a narrative of undoing, unweaving the threads of deception that had once defined her interactions. Engaging in work experiences that challenged her perceptions, Linda began fostering a newfound respect for the quiet dignity that lay in honest labor, an epiphany that reshaped her understanding of self-respect and humility. Together, they sought to reconstruct their relationship, rediscovering each other through a lens tempered by vulnerability and understanding. Michael's attempts to mend the bridge with Helen marked a crucial step toward personal growth, shifting his perspective from one of expectation to one of appreciation. The gradual scaffolding of their reformed relationship required patience, where each interaction became a lesson in humility that paved the way for genuine reconciliation. For Helen, seeing their transformation confirmed the broader theme of her justice, that true liberation transcended the notion of vengeance. Her actions had unfolded as a dedicated testament to discipline, patience, and the capacity for individuals to grow when confronted with their reflections. She had orchestrated not just financial restitution, but an intricate tableau of ethical awakening for Michael and Linda. In witnessing their transformation, Helen understood the power of choice, altering trajectories not through compulsion but by crafting a space where growth was inevitable. As Michael and Linda's journey evolved, so did theirs, defined by choices fostered from a foundation of humility, clear sight, and an acceptance that true wealth lay in the rebuilding of personal integrity. As the dust settled on Helen's orchestrated saga of justice, Michael found himself standing at a crossroads where paths of regret and redemption crossed with haunting urgency. This was no vortex of wrath or indignation, but a quiet storm of self-realization. Before him lay his most daunting endeavor, confrontation not with external chaos, but with the tumult swirling within. This juncture was to be the metamorphosis that life demanded from him, a reconstruction not just of familial bridges, but of fragmented self-understanding. Michael had always been a man swayed easily by the promises of ease and luxury that Linda had woven into his existence, seldom questioning the cost at which such comforts were acquired. Yet here he was forced to peel back layers he hadn't the fortitude to unearth before. The mirror confronting him wasn't cloaked in Helen's triumph or Linda's dissonance, but clothed in personal accountability. It reflected images distorted by years of underlying resentment, disappointment, and an aching desire for approval from the mother against whom he had committed the cardinal sin of betrayal. It began with a determination to mend the bridge with Helen, an endeavor that demanded more than surface apologies or rehearsed apologies. A transformation seen through actions rather than words, transparency rather than deception. Michael approached Helen not as the prodigal son seeking forgiveness at the altar of maternal grace, but as an equal humbled by his own transgressions. Each visit to her new abode was an exercise in vulnerability, where synchronized words bridged silent chasms of the past. He did not shield his imperfections under pride's heavy weight. Instead, Michael confronted them head-on, stripping away each veil of justification he had once embellished his actions with. And Helen, wise with the grains of sorrow and hope, listened with careful consideration, offering not immediate absolution, but an opportunity for genuine repentance. There was an unspoken understanding that the journey ahead was fraught with hurdles of introspection and change. Michael had to understand that reconciliation was not an entitlement but a reward that comes to those willing to acknowledge their faults fully and approach the wounded hearts with sincerity and humility. Helen's demeanor was that of quiet stewardship. She allowed him the space to falter, to reassess and rise again, never dismissing his efforts nor encouraging complacency. In recognizing the flaws of their fractured relationship, Michael began to appreciate the essence of familial kinship, an entity neither dictated by obligation nor convenience, but nourished by respect and reciprocal care. It was not enough to merely acknowledge mistakes. He had to reconstruct his relationship with Linda, aligning it upon pillars of truth and gratitude. The gradual dawning of understanding came like a gentle tide washing over Michael with realizations of his past errors and the extent of his mother's sacrifices unnoticed and unacknowledged. As he endeavored to open channels of heartfelt conversation with Helen, he tested the old boundaries, understanding that to rebuild trust, one must first face the harsh contradictions of one's previous beliefs. Michael discovered the strength of earnest humility. He learned to thank his mother, not for dispensing forgiveness like a balm, but for holding a mirror to his shortcomings, reflecting back the truth obscured by years of estrangement. With each contrite motion, as their once strained conversations began to show a brighter spectrum of understanding and mutual respect, Helen found in her heart room for tentative reconciliation. Yet the road of redemption is one less traveled, fraught with the burden of constant self-evaluation, an unfaltering path where Michael's reforms have to be untiringly tested against inevitable relapses. It was a promise made in quiet reflections between them, a silent oath to strive towards transparency and unburdened honesty. Michael was brought face to face with the realization that true victory isn't sought in vengeance, but in the imparting and accepting of wisdom previously ignored. This allowed not only for the mending of ties but also for transformative growth within himself. In the end, rekindling the strained relationship with Helen was more than an exercise in familial duty or securing a past bond. It was a genuine journey that both Michael and Helen walked together, redefining their existence, strengthened by moments of heartache and enlightenment alike. On this path of renewal, redemption no longer loomed as an act of dramatic resolution, but as ever-evolving enlightenment, a personal endeavor toward being a better son, a more self-aware individual, and perhaps a deserving participant in the restoration of familial harmony. Once Linda's life was an ensemble of privilege and misguided superiority, embedded within the comfortable walls of what seemed to be an impenetrable fortress. Blinded by the prevailing belief that social status equated personal value, Linda wielded her privilege with a sense of entitlement that often led her to devalue those who appeared less prosperous or influential. But now, as the old adage goes, life has a way of schooling even the most unyielding hearts in the arts of humility and introspection. With Helen's subtle but impactful revenge plot unraveling around her, Linda found the ground beneath her feet less stable than before. Realizing that she had become entangled in the web of her own arrogance and past actions began to erode Linda's fortress from within. Now, faced with diminished financial security and humbled by her new constraints, she started on a path she had never envisioned for herself, a journey toward self-awareness and redemption. What begins as a forced confrontation with her economic reality blooms into a rare opportunity for transformation. With the mirror of privilege shattered, Linda suddenly found herself peering into the fragments of a past in need of deep and honest reflection. Experience became Linda's reluctant but invaluable teacher. Unlike the secure yet shallow path she previously traversed, this was a road paved with unexpected lessons. Gone were the days of easy indulgence and looking down upon a world she deemed lesser replaced, instead by late nights working jobs she once derided, now vital for understanding the true weight and value of concerted earning. She begins to understand the very essence of respect isn't demanded through status, but is earned through authentic interactions and empathy. Linda's interactions with coworkers and superiors further shaped her perspective. She began to see not as figureheads of authority, but as individuals walking their unique paths of compromise and struggle. As Linda meticulously deals with the debris of her past indiscretions, there is a dawning realization: strength is not in having never failed, but in learning how to rise anew. Day by day, brick by brick, she meticulously works toward constructing a new identity, one not reliant on shadows of privilege but rooted robustly in the integrity of self-improvement. Observations of Helen's own fortitude inspire a measure of resolve previously unexercised in Linda's character, offering insights into the merit of enduring hardship with dignity and the subsequent power it yields. Throughout this journey, Linda finds herself reflecting on the nuances of regret and satisfaction. The depth of understanding she develops goes beyond mere surface regret for past actions and evolves into an appreciation for life's complexity, the inherent wisdom wrapped in adversity's cloak. She finds herself breaking habitual cycles of dismissiveness, now intent on fostering a narrative driven by respect and mutual understanding. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it without faltering. There were moments of vulnerability, seemingly insurmountable mental blocks, when past arrogance attempted to reclaim its illicit throne. Yet these moments did not define Linda's renewed path. Instead, they highlighted her unyielding commitment to growth. Her redemption is a mosaic, a beautifully chaotic amalgam of past errors and future decisions, crafted thoughtfully through earnest effort and unyielding dedication. As she embarks on the hopeful reconstruction of her relational bonds, especially that with Helen, Linda has a newfound respect for vulnerability and the dynamism of familial dynamics. Her approach becomes less about seeking redemption through others' forgiveness and more about aligning her actions and principles with the value and integrity she now cherishes. This is witnessed through sincere apologies, quiet gestures of respect, and an earnestness in seeking mutual understanding and reconciliation. Through these efforts, Linda embraces a realization that her past doesn't define her. Rather, her continuous actions in the present craft her character's tapestry. Linda's journey becomes emblematic of the metamorphic power inherent in introspection and acceptance. Not as an outcome of Helen's scheme solely, but as part of a broader journey towards self-worth and realizing the blessings of humility. Each choice thereafter blossoms with potential, fortifying her new narrative with the richness of experience and maturity qualities that were once alien but now reside comfortably within her evolving self-identity. And thus, Linda reinvents herself amidst the symphony of lessons learned, finally appreciating what indulging ignorance cost her. In embracing respect and humility, she writes her own story of redemption, where each chapter echoes resilience flavored with the silent strength Helen demonstrated along her journey, an inspiration that pervades the reconstructed foundation of Linda's renewed life. Helen's newfound freedom is a landscape of possibilities unfurling with each determined step. Liberated from the clutches of a family that once suffused her existence with betrayal and disrespect, Helen emerges as a profound testament to personal empowerment. Where her spirit was once constrained, it now expands to fill the spaces around her with strength and unyielding resolve. Her transition into independence becomes a melody of triumph as she casts off the weight of past grievances. In her new abode, Helen crafts a sanctuary of her own. Each room reflects a personal renaissance filled with artifacts that symbolize her reclamation of identity and courage. She has chosen an apartment with vast windows that bathe every corner in natural light, a metaphor for transparency and a life lived openly. The decor speaks to simplicity and elegance, echoing her intent to embrace clarity and purpose. Plants thrive under her care, their verdant beauty illustrating growth and resilience, themes that now permeate every facet of her being. Helen's days are no longer stitched with the thread of familial obligation, but are instead sewn with choices that reflect her liberated ethos. She divests herself of past grievances, channeling her energies into endeavors that mirror her newfound freedom. One such pursuit is the establishment of a charitable foundation aimed at supporting women who, like her, have been shackled by oppressive circumstances. This foundation becomes a beacon of hope for many, providing resources and guidance to aid in their journeys toward self-sufficiency and empowerment. Helen's vision stretches beyond immediate relief as she envisages a world where women stand united in strength and autonomy. Her engagement in this cause is not for recognition but stems from a deep-seated desire to transform pain into a source of collective empowerment. Each testimony of resilience she encounters through the foundation feeds her spirit, reaffirming that her path to freedom is not merely a personal victory, but a communal triumph. Helen's life is reshaped by her commitment to this cause, and through it she experiences a rebirth that eclipses the constraints of her past. Amidst these ventures, joy blossoms in the unlikeliest moments as she basks in the tranquility of a morning alone with a cup of herbal tea, or when an unexpected smile exchanged with a stranger lights up her day. Her solitude is no longer marked by loneliness but by contentment, a gift she savors deeply. Every simple pleasure is imbued with a sense of gratitude, reinforcing the happiness of living life on her terms. As Helen walks this path of independence, she transcends the narrative of victimhood and emerges as a figure of empowerment, commitment, and generosity. Her journey instills the courage needed to sever ties that suffocate and to seek solace in autonomy. With each deliberated step she takes, Helen keeps building a future free from the echoes of mistreatment and neglect. Her past is a lesson, not an anchor, influencing the choices she now makes toward her expansive future. Helen remains determined to explore new avenues, open new doors, and invest in positive change not just for herself, but for others who need the light she once sought. Her growth after betrayal is not marked by revenge but by the realization that true triumph lies in forgiveness and freedom. There is a serenity in knowing that rather than seeking vindication, Helen chose the path of peace and positivity. Her blessings accumulate in spaces where others might seek only revenge. She turns away from bitterness and focuses instead on planting seeds of hope, believing that together with determination, such seeds will flourish into a legacy of steadiness and inspiration for generations to come. In this newfound freedom, Helen has not just freed herself, she has ignited a spark of change in the world around her. Her life has become a lighthouse of transformation where the waves of courage wash over anyone who encounters her. Helen's story implores us to recognize that true empowerment does not come only from reclaiming what was lost, but also from creating what was always possible. Helen's future, now unbounded by the constraints of her past, unfurls before her like an endless tapestry of opportunity. Buoyed by her recent triumphs, Helen stands empowered, a beacon for those who find themselves adrift in the storm of betrayal. It is not the allure of wealth or the satisfaction of revenge that propels her forward, but a vision driven by purpose and the desire to uplift others. She envisions a world where her story of resilience becomes a guiding star for women trapped in similar cycles of sacrifice and neglect. Strategic planning becomes Helen's new forte. With the clarity of a general mapping out a campaign, she charts her course meticulously, each step deliberate and infused with insight. Her business acumen, honed through years of managing household finances with precision and thrift, becomes the foundation for her burgeoning entrepreneurial spirit. Helen considers a series of business ventures, each crafted to not only generate profit but also to provide platforms for those like her who seek empowerment. She targets the niche markets she once explored in the constraints of her home, homemade artisanal goods, and eco-friendly products. The vision isn't to simply amass wealth, it's to build a network of interdependent enterprises that support and mentor women from underserved communities, providing them with the skills and opportunities needed to forge their own paths. Helen's charitable foundations, already sowing seeds of change, become instruments of lasting transformation. She expands their reach, integrating education and vocational training programs that are designed to foster self-sufficiency. Helen's focus isn't simply on making a difference, it's on creating a legacy of empowerment. The charitable institutions she nurtures stand as monumental testaments to her belief that when women cooperate and lift each other, they can transcend even the most daunting obstacles. Helen's story underscores a vital lesson. True empowerment comes from recognizing one's worth and capabilities. Her path is lined with real-life examples that serve as inspirations for others. Consider Janet, a woman who, like Helen, emerged from the shadow of spousal betrayal to become a successful entrepreneur. Janet's transformation began with small steps, reclaiming her sense of self-worth through community engagement and mentorship. Their shared experiences become case studies, illustrating how societal norms can be challenged and redefined by those who dare to break the mold. It is a nuanced journey fraught with common missteps and unforeseen challenges, but one that Helen navigates with a profound sense of understanding and patience. A misconception often encountered in her seminars is the assumption that empowerment is a solitary journey. Helen repeatedly emphasizes the importance of community, the strength found in collective voices and shared experiences. She nurtures these principles, ensuring every woman she supports understands that while personal strength is essential, the alliances forged with others are equally vital. Another poignant lesson lies in the art of forgiveness and self-acceptance, a personal journey Helen traversed with grace despite the emotional toll of betrayal. She cautions against the corrosive nature of resentment, urging those in her mentorship programs to harness their pain as a catalyst for positive change rather than allowing it to become a quagmire of bitterness. As Helen's plans take shape, she confronts the reality of further growth with the zeal of one unfazed by adversity. Expansion opportunities beckon from opening new branches of her enterprises to diversifying the charitable programs she oversees. Each new venture is a thread woven into the fabric of her overarching goal to create a ripple effect where her personal victory over betrayal breeds a community nurtured by support and understanding. In this ongoing odyssey, Helen remains resolute, embodying the very resilience she espouses. Her future is a testament to transformation, a story of turning personal justice into a saga of collective empowerment. The cycle of revenge is replaced by a cycle of renewal, where justice isn't merely served but positively redefined into life's grand tapestry. Helen's journey inspires others to reimagine their narratives, not as victims of circumstance, but as architects of their destiny. Her tale isn't merely a recounting of past wrongs righted. It's an invocation for all who hear it to realize their potential for renewal, to understand that even in the aftermath of betrayal, life offers a chance to rebuild stronger and brighter. Helen stands as a testament to this indomitable spirit, a living reminder that true revenge lies not in retaliation, but in rising defiantly from the ashes to illuminate a path for others to follow. Helen stood before the remnants of her estranged family, a matriarch reborn from the ashes of disillusionment. The journey had been tumultuous, marked by betrayals that had once seemed insurmountable, yet here they all were faced with the echoes of a past they could no longer escape nor deny. The delicate tendrils of forgiveness threaded through their interactions, slow and cautious, yet undeniable in their presence. As they gathered around the oak dining table, the space, once resonating with estrangement, now began to hum with an unfamiliar warmth. The scars of the past were visible, yet it was the willingness to acknowledge them, to learn from their jagged edges, that was laying the foundation for a renewed bond. Helen observed Michael with a mother's critical eye tempered by understanding. She saw in him not just the son whose apathy had wrought so much pain, but a man in the throes of transformation, caught between the old and the new. Michael bore the weight of his choices heavily, the arrogance that had once blinded him now stripped away. In its place was a raw humility, a recognition of the havoc his indifference had wreaked. Every moment in Helen's presence was a silent plea, not just for forgiveness, but for a chance to prove that he could be the son she deserved. It was a path paved with small gestures, the offering of a cup of tea, the gentle inquiry about her day that spoke volumes where words failed. Linda, seated beside him, represented the other side of this familial coin. Her journey had been one of stark self-discovery, confronting the mirror of her past actions with a resolute determination to change. The disdain that had once defined her interactions with Helen was replaced by a genuine curiosity, a desire to truly understand the woman she had so carelessly dismissed. Her newfound maturity was reflected in her openness to listen, to engage in conversations that once would have felt like battlegrounds. Helen watched as Linda navigated her journey towards redemption, her work experience having imparted lessons in humility and respect. The arduous road had reshaped her, fostering an appreciation for the strength found in vulnerability. It was not lost on Helen the parallels between their lives. Both women had been required to rebuild themselves, each in her own way, emerging stronger for it. Conversation around the table flowed more freely than it had in years, laughter interspersed with moments of introspection. Michael shared stories of his newfound respect for financial responsibility, lessons he had learned painfully yet willingly. He spoke of plans not only for financial recovery but also for reinvesting in relationships long neglected, not out of necessity but desire. His words carried the weight of genuine intention, a small but significant triumph in itself. Linda, too, found her voice in these moments, sharing her own aspirations for the future. She expressed a desire to contribute meaningfully to society, inspired perhaps by Helen's charitable endeavors. Her sincerity was tangible, imbued with the understanding that true value lies not in material wealth, but in the legacy one leaves behind. These exchanges, once unimaginable, now painted a picture of a family rediscovering itself. The respect that had been so conspicuously absent was steadily becoming the bedrock of their interactions. Helen was aware of the delicate balance upon which this new harmony rested. There was no magic erasure for what had happened, no illusions that all was forgotten. Yet the willingness to move forward, to reinvent, to allow time to heal, was a powerful testament to resilience. In the quiet moments, Helen allowed herself the luxury of hope. Her heart, once guarded and brittle, began to thrum with the possibility of a family rebuilt, not on the fragility of obligation, but on the strength of mutual respect and understanding. She knew their journey was far from over, but the direction they were heading offered solace. This transformation did not dethrone her, nor did it exalt her above the others. It merely solidified her role as the anchor of this family, humble in acceptance, steadfast in faith. The relationship she had with her son, once teetering on the brink of irreparability, was being gradually stitched back together with threads of repentance and resolve. As dusk began to settle outside, Helen's mind drifted to the future. There were new adventures on the horizon, new opportunities to inspire and be inspired. She had forged a path through adversity, finding light not only for herself, but illuminating a way for others to follow. The room grew still as Helen rose, gratitude flowing through her veins. Here stood a woman who had redefined revenge into the sweetest form of justice, not through malice but through the boundless power of renewal and respect. And as the family parted ways for the night, a quiet promise hung in the air to rebuild respect and rise together. Alone, she stood, a solitary figure amid the echoes of a once bustling household, now reduced to a chastened silence. Helen had witnessed the gradual crumbling of the facade that had imprisoned her family in a cycle of deceit and betrayal. The mighty edifice they had erected upon the foundations of hubris and manipulation had finally caved in, leaving her daughter-in-law and son grappling with the wreckage of their misguided ambitions. Their fall was not marked by a dramatic collapse, but by the gentle, unrelenting force of truth, and now only shadows remained where once false pride had loomed large. Helen had not sought to elevate herself upon the ruins of their collapse. Instead, she had learned the quiet strength of humility. Each step she took, deliberate and in silence, resonated with a newfound maturity. She had transcended the desire for vindication, finding solace in the serenity that came with understanding. Power was no longer her companion, peace was now her consort. In this newfound realm of tranquility, she discovered that silence was not emptiness, but space for thought, a comforting cloak that shielded her from life's noise. And you, standing on the precipice of your own tumultuous journey, wonder if you could have endured as she did. Could you have nurtured patience, allowing justice to simmer until it reached its natural boiling point? Helen had become the silent architect of her own redemption, proving that patience is both a virtue and a silent weapon, often underestimated by its adversaries. In the end, no words of reproach were necessary. Those who remained behind could only reflect on the insidious way their own actions betrayed them, with betrayal a persistent echo, whispering in the corridors of a memory they could not erase. The ring that symbolized shared vows and intentions now lay unclaimed on the floor, a quiet testament to fractured faith and the barren soil where trust once rooted. What remained for Helen was freedom, like a deep, cleansing breath in an empty room stripped of past burdens. No longer did she seek forgiveness that was never hers to give. She had received in return something far more potent: liberation. She turned to the light that now played across her path, her gait steady and unyielding, a figure receding not into obscurity, but into a vast, welcoming canvas of opportunity and choice. You might find yourself asking where such stories resolve. But no conclusion is needed here, only the sacred hush that follows a life's symphony. Some endings arrive not with fanfare but with the gentle grace of nature settling into a peace that resounds louder than any declaration. This was not an end decomposed into morality tales, but a passage into reflection, a threshold crossed not with boasts of victory but with a quiet understanding of the costs and the gifts born out of endurance. and you consider now the echoes of your own decisions. In the silence that sprawls before you, what will you choose to hear? Perhaps here in this hollow yet hallowed space is where you might find your own rebirth. Where some stories cease to unfold, life simply continues, more profound in the pause, more complete in the stillness. Here in the sacred pause after the storm, Helen discovered her rebirth and left echoes not of rage, but of harmony.